A curious thing when a man has an awakening, Kundalini experience, because it really tests his inner strength, his resilience, because we have each of us an opposite, a shadow person, an opposite aspect to the one that we show. And you think of it this way. You think of the ideal man for woman. And everything that she would consider to be masculine or seductive or sexy or desirable in a man are, these ideal qualities she ascribes to being a man. If she were to act out those qualities in her best, macho man image, or the best sexy version of a man, her best ideal, not even just sexy, just, her ideal characteristics in a man, if she were to act those out, that is essentially her masculine half. That would be the sun of her masculine half in her natal chart. That would be what the best qualities she decides to demonstrate to the world when she asserts herself to show out to the world. If she ever had to demonstrate what it means to her to be a man, that is essentially her masculine half, and that's her shadow. That's what she's looking for in a partner. Same goes for men. So when a man is looking for a woman, if he were to, for instance, say hypothetically, dress up in drag and try to, just for fun, he was that confident in his masculinity that he dressed up in drag and he wanted to put on a show as a girl and be convincing. You got some guys that do that, right? Like performers. You have actors who consider themselves straight, but they have no problem dressing up as women and can do so and act it out very well. They're very convincing. It's because they've embodied their shadow half. They've really done the shadow work to understand what their feminine half is like. And when we have this awakening, it's sort of like a recalibration of our inner elements. You always know I talk about how our assertiveness is really what's attributed to the masculine force. The masculine force is essentially assertiveness. It's you taking all that's within you and asserting it forward to accomplish something, be it by speech, be it by action. It's about your strengths and utilizing them through the arts of war to accomplish your will, to set your vibration out into the ether so that it completes something, it completes a task, and your desire is carried out. And that's how we assert ourselves through Mars, and how we receive that which we desire within us. If we're looking to set our vibration out into the world, that's our Mars, but looking to receive the vibration within us is Venus. So whatever it is we feel we're deficient in, that we broadcast our Mars in search of our men, broadcast our Mars in search of our Venus. So we broadcast our Mars looking for the qualities we figure are the polar opposite of the Venus we want to attract. So we broadcast these qualities through our actions, and that's our asserting ourselves through our Mars. So what we're looking for is for someone to respond with a Venus. So we get Venus responding, and that is essentially, that's our shadow. We are polarizing ourselves to play out the man so that we can seek the ideal feminine. The interesting thing is, during this awakening, when a man has a Kundalini experience, and over time, as his elements begin to settle, because it is a whole tower moment where he is shaken to his core. And if he's truly on the path of spirituality, he's tested his morals and his values, and he's ready for initiation, essentially. And it comes when the student is ready. So on this path of self-awareness, and it comes in many different ways. People seek it different ways, through religion, through just spirituality, through meditation. it comes in different ways. It's about you having a genuine approach to asserting yourself spiritually, to taking on a spiritual path as a way of life, to looking at the world and energies spiritually, whether you call them by different names, whether you call it by God. It's just you looking at the world through a spiritual lens and measuring yourself against your own sense of judgment and good moral values, and keeping yourself along that path and refining yourself and finding other people along the path who resonate with those good qualities and sharpening yourself against those good qualities and just staying good. And then you find yourself on the spiritual path where at some point you come into a whole tower moment, a whole spiritual, cataclysm inwardly. And what it's doing is wrecking your elements, breaking them apart, so that they can, over time, reknit together based on your vibration, based on your qualities, which is usually just, symbolically, it's the energies and the elements as they equate to, as seen in your natal chart. You look at all of the different aspects of your natal chart. You can break those down numerically, break them down by their archetypal and elemental values, and come up with a whole system where it's quantified, the numbers and the elements. And you can look at whether you have a preponderance of one element or another. And you can simply do those just by a general understanding of your natal chart. Basically, you can just take a look at what elements you're filled with, by what planets are and what signs, and whether you have there's a fire that's greater in your chart because you have fire planets like Mars and fire signs like Aries, or the sun, in Leo, or Jupiter in Sagittarius. You just have these great fiery aspects, and it makes you a fiery person, or have a fiery personality. You're able to accomplish things and set yourself, your will, whenever you want. You got to get up and go whenever you want it. It's always there. That's what a person with fire, a lot of fire in their chart. People who are emotional have a lot of water. People who are always in their mind and their, the brainiacs, the geniuses tend to be Aquariuses, or the speakers tend to be Geminis. Those are air. And you have earth. People who are Capricorns tend to be very rich, or workaholics. They're strong, they're sturdy. Like earth. That's the earth quality. It's about manifestation in the physical realm and the physical senses. So Virgos tend to be fixed on details and natural resistance, setting the optimal natural resistance. And I'm going on a tangent, but just to break them down, how elements play out in our natal charts. And then, of course, Taurus, who is about geometry and symmetry. They tend to be very beautiful, very symmetrically or aesthetically pleasing to look at, women. Or be into sensual things. But anyway, it's just a broad overview. I mean, it breaks down into the entire universe. The whole universe literally breaks down into this 12-fold nature. But I went off on a major tangent to say that when a man actually comes into his water and his earth, when his elements recalibrate, we come into the goddess. The goddess makes herself aware to us very subtly, and over time in a more profound way. And it's the feminine aspect of God, which is our emotions, because our society's been built to sort of downplay emotions and to raise up intellect as the chief MO of progress, modus operandi for progress. It's all about science, and we've suppressed the feminine half, which is about the body and being into the body, because we look at masculinity in patriarchy, or rather in patriarchy we uphold the values of masculinity, and with masculinity we abuse the crap out of our bodies. We push them in ways that are very abusive to accomplish great things, because we intend to be great with our bodies, and we want our bodies to demonstrate our greatness. So we push our bodies to these breakneck limit breaking paces, and take on we adopt these patterns of behavior where we are breaking our bodies down to make them better, make them greater, make them stronger by destroying them and forcing them to evolve. But it's a very inverted way to look at how the body is intended to be a temple to house to house the subtle energies of the universe. We have to change the way we value our water, which is our emotions, which are the keys to manifestation. So we manifest through our emotional state. And there's not a stronger emotion for manifestation than gratitude, provided one is in a state of receptivity, which they teach you in Kabbalah. It's about the idea of receiving, stepping into a knowledge of the divine feminine, which is a knowledge or an innate awareness of the water and earth aspects of the universe and within oneself. So when we come into this awakening, we begin to embody the traits of the divine feminine, and she comes to us based on our affinity for water and earth. And everyone has them to some degree, and we access them different in our natal chart and in different parts of our psyche and in different relationships we form, business, personal, and even our hobbies. We channel and receive the energies of earth and water as men in ways that are destructive to the emotions and the body, because we are out of tune with the divine feminine. But those who seek the spiritual path at some point come into the awareness that they need to change their relationship with themselves and with the divine feminine. And that's when you find yourself at the gateway to the steps of the inner temple. That is the nature of the third temple, the temple they're seeking, the temple where God's power is truly housed. The third temple is the original. It's the body. The torus is the magnetic field, housing the power of God as it emanates from within the body and connects with the outer, the macrocosm, the outer magnetic field. There's a way for us to tap into this inner divinity by settling the elements within ourselves. You always hear me talk about how the elements need to be balanced, because once Aries to Cancer is balanced and all four of the elements are settled, and our waters have achieved a stillness, we become receptive to the power of Leo, the Lion of Judah, receptive to the will of God, the more subtle, or the golden vibration of God, which can only be felt when one achieves stillness. And in meditation, they try and teach you the access to the divine feminine, but there's more to embodying the feminine than by entering into a state of absolute receptivity and inertness. The divine feminine was meant to be utilized through movement as well. By dancing, we become submissive to the will of light or the will of electricity. When we dance, we listen to music, which is emotion, right? Transmuted into electrical signals or transmuted into vibration, emotions. And that vibration is a force that carries the will of, or the intent of the creator, the producer, and it moves us. We become submissive to it. It moves us in ways that trigger us through our emotions, but only by opening up the emotions do we receive the will of that producer. It works the same way with the power of Leo. When we truly learn to embody the divine feminine, and this was why Jesus had a really interesting veiled message for eunuchs. And it's different for everyone. The idea of embodying the divine feminine, because we each have different functions in society. There's some of us who have a higher calling as far as she's concerned. And some of us who have a calling to build the temple, the earthly manifestation of the temple that enables us to empower the true temple, which is the body. Our scientists currently trying to reach them. And I've been, I believe, marginally successful. I'm reaching people through different forums on different YouTube channels in the scientific community and in various communities. And it's my hope to reach some of these people with these really large platforms, to get them talking about the effects of gold on plasma and on heat and on the magnetic torus and in the body. When people take it in as ormus, how it changes them, how it recalibrates them and balances the left and right hemispheres of the brain. It creates electrical impulses that allow for the body to achieve like a golden homeostasis. You always hear me talk about how there's this golden resonance pattern for biological rhythms, for biorhythms. And Ormus apparently allows us, it provides a way for us to achieve this in our bodies. And what I'm trying to do is get them to understand that by adding it to the atmosphere, it'll help filter the plasma from the sun. It'll help immunize Gaia from the shifting electrical pressures of space from the luminaries as they dance. And this gold will help catch this heat and this pressure, because pressure equates to heat. There's pressure in space. It equates to heat. When it hits an atmosphere where the elements are sealed, that force breaks apart the elements, and they have to receive this force and transmute it and receive this pressure, and it disturbs the elements, and they have to resettle. So by immunizing Gaia against the shifting electrical pressures of space with the gold in the atmosphere, it'll change everything. It'll change the way light and heat are distributed on the planet, change our the nature of our relationship in terms of polarity with the sun. It'll change the way light flows on the planet, change the way time flows on the planet. Nonetheless, digressed in a major way. I was actually talking about how when when we come into knowledge of the divine feminine, she tests us. She really, really tests us. And I remember reading some passages in the works of Thoth, I think on the golden, or the, the emerald tablets, how there's a warning about going below. There's a very veiled warning about accessing the power of the divine feminine, because it's through that intuition and that emotional stillness do we become receptive to divine inspiration, and we receive messages from heaven and from the spirit, and we're able to embody this energy. And it's not always messages intended to be spoken, but oftentimes messages are the same messages that permeate all things in nature, but it's intended to correct us. It's intended to recalibrate our entire spectrum, the fullness of our spectrum. Because as men and women, we are polarized either toward our masculine or feminine half. But as a society becomes more and more spiritual, they find that in their behavior, and not just to say sexually, but just in their behavior in general, the way they honor life and the way they honor the planet and the energies and the way they see the elements, they embodying these energies and these archetypes within them, they find that there is less polarity, less polar division between they and their shadow, and they in their other gender. When we learn to view the elements as they are and see them operating through us, we find that not all men were meant to be gladiators. Not all women were meant to be seamstresses. Some women were intended to be gladiators. Some women were intended to be astronauts. Some women were intended to be matriarchs. Some men were intended to be seamstresses. Some men were intended to be dancers. Some men were intended to be artists. And some men were intended to be kings, and gladiators, speakers, builders, entrepreneurs, motivators of different sorts. We were intended to cover every aspect of the psyche, and it was intended to be held at equal value, because the elements were intended to be balanced. And when the elements are balanced, we're balanced masculine and feminine. And when we come into these, the awareness of the elements and the energies operating within us, it changes our relationship with our polar half. When women tap into their divine masculine, they find themselves with an increase in potence that allows them to achieve incredible things, where they're no longer waiting on a man, for instance, to build their lives for them. And or some were intended for that. Some are creatures that are just so beautiful, they're touched by Venus, and they're meant to be admired. And they get scooped up by some millionaire who just wants to flower them with gifts. It happens, and that's, we can see that in their natal chart. Some women have that gift, but intend to utilize it in different ways. And it all really depends on the person. It's our choice what it's supposed to look like when we recalibrate these elements. The whole point is we learn to use them in their entirety. And we don't discount that despite the fact that we may be a drop-dead gorgeous woman, we may have an inner warrior that trumps our inner beauty. And we're intended to be a soldier instead, because we're all Mars, and Mars and Aries, and they're more fierce, and they're fighters more so than they are beautiful. But then they blend the two, and turn fighting into an art. Who knows? It plays out many different ways. The whole point is she's in tune with her fire. And when women are in tune with their air, you have these women who are amazing scientists, because on average, women tend to be smarter than men, because they're working with both hemispheres of the brain, on average, simultaneously. I'll say it's easier. I have to say this. It is easier and more acceptable for women, the way our society honors the traits of manhood and the traits of masculinity and of force, of air and fire, for women to empower themselves by accessing the divine masculine than it is for men to step into utilizing the gifts and the traits of the divine feminine, which are, amongst many things, emotional receptivity. And tapping into those emotions. When you first tap into those emotions as a man seeking a spiritual path, if anything, being a man, you learn in our society is that men learn that emotions are weakness, so we bury them. And we channel our emotions through our Mars, typically. So usually we don't learn to work with our emotions, on average, until we're much older, or for some reason we're just in a position where we are allowed to be emotionally balanced. We're in an environment that honors that. But usually, and especially in urban areas, men aren't. And we learn to assert ourselves through our masculine traits, our Mars, and that's through electrical pressure. And that's, you don't deal with your emotions until unless you can logic them to death and compartmentalize them, strip what's useful from them, compartmentalize the rest, and turn everything into a nice objective, so everything is neat and categorized and able to be sorted out in a very objective, very pragmatic and practical manner. And these are also the traits of Earth, but these are the qualities of patriarchy, because of the way that we've built the society to achieve by progress, constant progress. So progress, and the idea of progress is it's about moving forward as opposed to being still, or moving forward as opposed to receding, having a proper balance. So by moving forward constantly, we've taken on the traits by default of patriarchy, which is the mindset of one who is in a constant state of forward movement or progress, or achieving or being productive. We learn when we become spiritually attuned that it's not always about being productive in the outer world, but sometimes being productive in the inner world. And to achieve this, we have to be disengaged from the outer world. But our society isn't really built to accommodate, not for everyone, but for those who've achieved that homeostasis between their work life and their free time and their family life. They're able to balance this in their lives, to work so that they can play, or work so that they can be still, or be their masculine so that they can be their feminine. But for the majority of us, we have to be in our man all the time, on our hustle, on our grind, on our getting it done, on our doing it hard, doing it big, doing it strong, being productive, showing no weakness. We don't have time for games, and everything that isn't being productive or getting money is a game. So we've even inverted our earth, because it's constantly about production to trade our effort for money, about being productive in a material sense. And there's more to the earth element than being productive in the outer world. We have to be productive in the inner world. So we have to cultivate a relationship with the divine feminine in a very different way. And when we become spiritually attuned, which is what I'm trying to get at, the divine feminine comes to us and she tests us. She really tests us, because she intends to permeate every aspect of our lives, and that includes the sexuality. And that's why we have Tantra, because Tantra teaches us to use the sexual energy in ways that heal us internally and increase our abundance, increase our productivity, because it allows us to use the sexual energy to calibrate the elements within us, to properly calibrate the elements. That's a whole different topic, and I'm not even an expert on Tantra. There are a number of people who know all about it. But I wanted to say the divine feminine, she tests us all, and she's testing society. You see her hand in the world. You see her coming, her manifesting her presence. And I wanted to say all that to say that, and I intend to do this in another video. I'll talk all about the divine feminine and how she intends to test humanity, test every facet of our society. She's testing us every way from our values toward women, our values toward children, our values toward life and nature. That's why you see this rise of uh, not going to have it anymore. We're not going to tolerate it anymore. For every soul that does not have a strong voice by itself, but that depends on the voice of the collective, that is the divine feminine reaching through to recalibrate us, to test us. And we perceive it as the test of Saturn, or the test of the shadow. We see it in our science. She's breaking apart our scientific paradigm. She's revealing more of the forms of nature and the nature of form. She's testing us through our sexuality, by our views toward masculine and feminine genders, by our view toward our own sexual spectrum. We as creatures of intelligence are not bound to polarity by any means. Because if we were, we wouldn't have colors. We understand colors because we have emotions. But were emotions a binary thing, we just have on and off, or yes and no. We'd be computers. And that what we're rushing to be more like? And that's why the divine feminine is stepping in. Because a dramatic recalibration of the emotions is needed for us to achieve the golden state that we need to be in for this rapture thing when it happens. The shift into, what do they call it, the 5D, the fifth dimension, quintessence of Leo, the fifth house, the fifth element. I find it so funny. Remember in the end of the movie, The Fifth Element, Leo. She was the fifth element, the perfected human. And she was all about love, and so is Leo, the house of love, the fifth house of Leo is all about love, the sun, alchemical gold. It's about the quality of love. When love is achieved by a balance, a total balance of the four elements, well, then a whole different energy comes in. Energy changes its nature. The nature of energy changes because then there is a perfection of the marriage of force and of form. And that is the true Hieros Gamos. That's the true marriage in heaven. When you read the Bible and it talks about a marriage in heaven, it's actually what it's talking about. A marriage of the elements.